Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Tuesday night at Staples Center, it was the Suns versus the Lakers. The Phoenix, arguably the best team in the league, against a broken down and beat up Lakers squad. It was a game where nothing had to give, and it didn't. The Lakers lose by 18. Plus, is the Christmas Day game in peril? We'll discuss all of that and more on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day. Monday through Friday, we get this thing up early for you, no matter where you are, what you're doing, when you listen to your first podcast of every day, even if it's in the wee hours of the morning. Locked On Lakers is there for you. Make another Locked On podcast your second. That's fine. Just make us your first. So lots we want to get into over the course of the show, including the Christmas Day games in peril. David Silver, David Stern, Adam Silver.
David Silver was 90210.
That's true. Too many combinations there.
He had an eyebrow like Vanilla Ice.
Yes, and who knows, might have made a bang-up NBA commissioner one day had the show lasted that long. So Adam Silver tells Malika Andrews of ESPN that the league is not going to be pausing necessarily or stopping play, but also reporting out there on Tuesday that the schedule could move around a little bit. Games could be postponed and all that kind of stuff. Everybody stay ready. So we'll get to that. But first, let's talk about Tuesday's game, Andy. One of the last days we'll be able to say the Lakers lose at Staples Center, 108-90 to the Phoenix Suns. You know, this is, to me, I watched this game and I just sort of shrugged. It's like the Lakers played hard. They did what they could. They tried. And Phoenix, under normal circumstances this season, has been way better. And certainly under the circumstances of this game, the result was not a surprise.
The Lakers demonstrated in this game, among many things, just how small to non-existent their margin for error is, Brian. Because in the first half of this game, I thought they actually played, all things considered, very well, taking into account that they're shorthanded. They just get back Talen Horton-Tucker. Trevor Ariza still getting back into the fold. The guys that aren't available, including Frank Vogel, David Fizdale coaching, Phoenix just being a better team than them, period. Mm-hmm. They played a very good first half, and it was interesting. In about halfway through the third quarter, I tweeted out at Cam Brothers that among the reasons the Lakers were able to stay in this game despite a bunch of different pushes from Phoenix was that to that point, with about 3 minutes left in the third quarter, they'd only turned the ball over 5 times. In the next 8 minutes, they turned the ball over 5 times. All teams, even great teams, will go through a barrage of really stupid turnovers, but the Lakers are in a place right now where they just cannot have anything like that happen at all. And we saw that last Sunday against Chicago. Like, they played, even with mistakes that they had, well enough that they could have won that game, but they are not in a position where really they can afford to make mistakes. Like, you're going to make some because every team does, but unfortunately theirs are going to hurt more than a lot of other teams they play because of the situation that they're in.
And I think, if you want an example of that, like, the difference in margin for error, and again, none of this is surprising. Phoenix, with Anthony Davis, if the Lakers had AD, if they had their full complement of players, at least the ones that they've had throughout the season, I would still think Phoenix would probably win this game because they've been way better than the Lakers over the course of the year. But, I think a great example of what you're talking about there in terms of margin for error, the Suns, part of the reason the game was a 2-point game at halftime was that Phoenix missed all but 3, I believe, of their first half 3-pointers. I want to say there were 3 for 22 in the first half, which is bad. It was something like that. And, they can do that. Like, they can do that and still be winning at the half. And obviously the Lakers cannot. And you go through, the performances. LeBron was 13 of 19, 6 of 6 from the free throw line. He only took 5 3-pointers, so 14 of those shots were, he was playing downhill, he was attacking the rim, he was doing all that stuff. So for 34 points there, and Westbrook 10 of 20. He had 10 rebounds, he had 5 assists, and until those turnovers, played a pretty tight game. I thought those guys played pretty well. You look down at the rest of the team that the Lakers have available to them. THT gets back in the lineup. You're talking about Isaiah Thomas. You're talking about Carmelo Anthony, who gets tossed from the game, and all this stuff. It's like you look at who is their third best player, and if you settle on THT, if you settle on Isaiah Thomas, well, those guys together were combined 2 of 24. This team can't afford 2 of 24 from 2 players. I mean, that the offense isn't that good. That's just not going to get her done.
They are just going to have to tighten things up as much as they possibly can over 48 minutes in ways that I think a lot of these guys, even ones who have played on championship caliber teams, they're not used to having to make everything so damn near perfect, because otherwise you don't survive.
David Fizdale was asked after the game, as you try to, figure out what's happening with these lineups and they're constantly shifting and all this, what can you draw or plan around or do off of these games? And he kind of laughed. You don't want to be in a situation where you feel like the answer is, I don't know, just sort of throw up your hands, because the coaching staff's not doing that. But at the same time, it is really difficult to try to draw conclusions or game plan or figure out what's to come. But what do you do? Against in this particular game, because in the next segment I want to talk about what's coming, because I think that's really important. But in a game like this, you play as hard as you can, and I think that this game for them is probably much easier to shrug off than many of the games that they've lost over the course of the season. Angry and disappointed and frustrated as they may be, I just feel like this is an easy one to let go.
Well, it's an easy one to let go if you believe that the positives from this game, like the way they played in the first half and for, I think, some of the third quarter, if you believe that those things are sustainable moving forward, then yeah, you could put together some wins even in this condition. But again, they just have to hold themselves to a standard of any mistakes that are avoidable. We just have to avoid them. Whether you're talking about bad turnovers, whether you're talking about bad shot selection, whether you're talking about rotations that you should make and you don't, whether you're talking about Carmelo Anthony, who even on that second technical had a right to complain because he got fouled pretty egregiously by, I believe it was Jay Crowder on a jump shot. Melo has to know, right, I've already got one technical. My team is going to be fighting its ass off to try to win this game. I just have to shut the bleep up. You just
gotta
do.
Eat it. All right, let's talk about what's coming, because the talent gap changes depending on who the Lakers are playing. Lakers versus Suns, like I said, for me at least, Andy, easy to throw this one away because I had low expectations for this game going in. But this is also probably the least significant game the Lakers are going to be playing over the next week and a half. Let's talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Calm. You want to know what makes LeBron James King James? Sleep. That's right. Sleep is his superpower. Calm, the #1 app for sleep and meditation, has teamed up with LeBron James to help you activate the power of sleep. LeBron and Calm know that your mind is like any other muscle in your body, but you don't need to be a world champion to learn how to train it. Calm can help you train your brain so you sleep better, you reduce your stress, you perform at your best, just like LeBron James. So head to calm.com/LockedOnNBA. For a limited time, you get 40% off a Calm premium subscription. You get access to the nature scenes that LeBron loves, like Rain on Leaves, which actually really is a relaxing
really is very
sound.
Calming. It is.
It's quite pleasant. Sleep stories, meditation, so you can be ready for any challenges that life throws your way. Again, limited time, our listeners can join LeBron in using Calm, getting a 40% discount on a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/LockedOnNBA. Locked On NBA. Unlock content to help you focus, ease stress, sleep better. Get started at calm.com/LockedOnNBA. That's calm.com/LockedOnNBA.
So Andy, Russell Westbrook was asked after the game by Dave McMenamin of ESPN, like just the kind of about the mindset. The Lakers 32 games in are at 500. As Dave pointed out, they have the same record now as they did at the start of the season, same winning percentage, I should say, at the start of the season as they do now. That is not obviously where the Lakers want to be. The loss pushes them into 7th in the conference, which is obviously, below the play-in line. They are, 3 games away from 10th. So they're 3 games away from Memphis in 4th, but they're also 3 games away from Sacramento in 10th. Portland and Sacramento actually tied for 10th and 11th. San Antonio now 12 and 18 through Tuesday's games. So the Lakers are kind of in the danger zone. I think it's fair to say. And Westbrook, kind of answered optimistically. It's like, look, we haven't been together all season. We all know that we can be so much better than we have been. But there's a lot to look forward to, and I guess that's a good way of looking at it from a mentality standpoint. But and I said after the what was the last game they played, the Chicago game, that it's gonna be hard for the Lakers to expect to win a lot without Davis and missing a bunch of guys. But with LeBron and Westbrook, at least in theory, you have enough talent to compete. I don't think that necessarily applies to a game against the Suns, because Phoenix is so good and has been so much better than pretty much everybody this season. But I do think it makes the next few games incredibly important. They see San Antonio on Thursday. The Spurs are actually played quite well, but are still 6 games under 500 overall. They played well over the last 13 games. I think they're 8-5. They just throttled the Clippers on Monday. It was. Then they get a depleted Nets team on Christmas, maybe. Then they get the Rockets, the Grizzlies. Okay, on the road, maybe you chalk that one up as a game you don't win. You get the Blazers on New Year's Eve, and you have the Timberwolves on January 2nd. These are teams that they can compete against with LeBron and Westbrook. And there are also teams that are chasing them in the playoff standings in, Minnesota and, San Antonio and Portland, that if they lose those games, they're losing serious ground in the Western Conference.
Well, if you're looking for things that you can be optimistic from this loss, no matter if you chalk it up as something that was disappointing, just because of the way it ended up winding down, or like you were saying, so in some respects, just sort of, a penciled in loss. Trevor Ariza in his second game back looked a lot better. Played 21 minutes. He had 12 points on 4-4 shooting, hit all 3 of the shots he took from 3-point range, had 5 rebounds, 2 steals. And, beyond the fact that his presence alone just gives them more of an ability to go smaller the way they're now forced to do, and to play these lineups either with LeBron at center, or if you're looking to get LeBron off the floor a little bit, but you don't want to have to go with DeAndre Jordan or Dwight Howard, who didn't play in this game, by the way, his first game back. It wasn't clarified why. I reached out to a fellow Lakers media guy, and I was wondering if it was due to Dwight conditioning issues as opposed to just David Fizdale wanting to start DeAndre.
David Fizdale, DeAndre is David Fizdale's Avery Bradley.
Well, that would be a fireable offense. Just like if that's just and I don't even mean that as much of a shot against Avery Bradley as it just would be that's a bad leg to stand on. But this person that I reached out to thought, for whatever it's worth, that it was more of a conditioning thing, and that Dwight would end up starting the next game against San Antonio, but we'll see. But, beyond the fact that Trevor just unlocks more options just by literally being, he is a physical type that they need. They need a guy who's like 6'7", 6'8", a true wing. You watch Trevor out there, and, granted, I don't know exactly every single thing that's supposed to be happening on every single possession in terms of rotations and stuff like that, but he rarely looks like he went to the wrong place. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
no,
when there's
absolutely. Yeah,
when there's decisions
yeah,
to be made,
absolutely.
you know, you never see Trevor ending up in the same spot as somebody else that like wasn't a double. Like he always seems to understand exactly where you're supposed to be going. And they just need more guys like that, period. So if
Sure.
you're looking for something positive to take from this game at all, or whatever it means to you, Trevor looked better and you're seeing signs of how he can help.
That is all encouraging. And so it's like, okay, but that's not gonna be enough against Phoenix, especially when THT, Isaiah Thomas, we talked about that, earlier, Andy, that 2 of 24 figure. The Lakers are really in a spot where they need excellent performances from LeBron, and ideally Westbrook as well. And they got about 1.5 way there. I mean, I thought
Yeah.
LeBron was really good on Tuesday, and Westbrook up until those late turnovers, I thought played very solidly. And then it's going to have to be and who is going to give them like a really good performance, whether it's keeping, and then overall, defensively they have to hold their integrity as a group, but it's got to be, I think it's really, there's gonna be a lot of attention on THT. Like training wheels got to come off, man. Like they cannot have anything like this going forward. It's not necessarily fair, but until Malik Monk or someone like that is cleared and there's somebody else you can look at who can maybe free up some offense here, because Lakers scored, what is that, 48 points in the second half. I mean, they're not good offensively. They need better from certain members of the supporting cast. And right now, of the guys who are on the roster and available, Talen Horton-Tucker is where I would shine the spotlight and be like, dude, it's got to be now.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, THT said after the game that he was really feeling it from being
absolutely
away from basketball, like that conditioning was an issue for him. Like he said that during this period, he basically did not leave his house. Like he said that going to this game was the first time he'd been outside since getting put in the protocols. He said he didn't really do anything other than just watch a ton of movies.
They're really not. They are not allowed to work out. Like that's
right.
part of the rule when you're in the quarantine.
Right. Just so people really understand this. Like, he said like it was getting his legs back under him and getting his wind back under him, his breathing and all that stuff. Like, and he wasn't saying this in a way that was like making excuses. He just was really explaining what was going on.
Again, I'm not trying to crush the guy in his.
No, I'm just providing the context.
Right, sure. And that is you're right to do it. I'm just saying, like when you go into Thursday's game and they go into Saturday's game and all that stuff, like anybody who's capable of putting up a decent performance, because you can't rely on Trevor.
No, THT's got to do some extra time on the treadmill or whatever.
Right,
like, I mean, they need ready for Thursday.
Yeah, you can't look at Wayne Ellings. It's like, hopefully guys like Monk get back in the lineup, because I think good Lord, they could use that.
Austin Reeves being back could be helpful.
Austin Reeves would be a huge help, but like as good of a story as Isaiah Thomas is, I think anything you get out of him is sort of found money until he reestablishes himself solidly as a player. Just like that, who is the third best player on the Lakers was a really hard question, or fourth best player, with after the big three. Who's the next best player? They're down to two. So who is the next best player after the stars on the Lakers was a really hard question to answer going into the season. It's even harder now, but it's even more important because if the Lakers are going to tread water, if they're going to make something out of this stretch, the games that are coming up against the lesser teams are far more important than the ones against the elite teams. Let's talk about the potential for disruption over the weekend on Christmas and what might be coming. Adam Silver says there will be no cancellations or postponement of the season, but that doesn't mean there won't be potential disruption. We'll talk about it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered for this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the College Bowl season and pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the website, use your mobile device, sign up today, receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive that bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest, easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, so don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline, where the games start.
Andy, Locked On Lakers is also brought to you by Built Bar. It's the holiday season. Grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, even better than a candy bar. It's Built Bar. It's filled with so much holiday goodness, with so much decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but it also amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, high in protein. So you get the best of both worlds. It's delicious and it's healthy, and it's got tons of flavors. So many things you'll have a hard time choosing. You can have the raspberry, you can have the mint brownie, the cherry, the double chocolate, the cookies and cream, or the peanut butter brownie. I'm allergic to peanuts. That makes that particular decision much easier for me, but for you, it'll be more complicated. Built Bar gives you all the extra fuel you need to get through the holiday season, to bust down the mall doors right before Christmas, to get those post-Christmas sales if you're out there, or even type real fast if you're just doing online shopping. So, because it's a season of peace and love, don't bring up your favorite Built Bar at any family parties. People are passionate about them. They'll fight, and it can ruin everything. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Again, that's the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off at built.com.
Really quick, just to make sure it was clarified, LeBron said after this game, because, he hurt his ankle stepping on Jay Crowder's foot, that he does not expect to miss any time. He said he will be ready for the next game. He also said, just because this is an interesting question in terms of playing so much center right now, he said in terms of any type of physical toll, doesn't matter to him one way or the other. Like, his job is his job. And if he's playing center, that's his job. And he doesn't really see it as a particularly taxing thing or something that needs to be worried about in terms of his
vis-a-vis his minutes, because his minutes are getting so much attention.
Right, exactly. Like, his minutes are something to be concerned about, but not because he's playing center. He didn't say anything about his minutes, but
right, I wouldn't have expected him to say anything different.
No,
even if he thought they were way more exhausting, I wouldn't expect him to say so.
No, but it is just, given the fact that we have heard Anthony Davis put out that preference of not wanting to play center in the first place, and the idea of always being, the physical wear and tear, just thought it was interesting to hear LeBron say, like, look, it's fine. And I don't mean that.
I'm sure Lakers fans will make that connection.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, though, because it was the first time I'd heard him talk about the actual physical toll of playing center, or I guess from his perspective, lack thereof.
It depends, I think, a lot on the matchups and who they're playing, and all that stuff. But I wouldn't expect him to say otherwise. I think that the problem with LeBron is just, 13 of 19 from the floor. He only played 34 minutes, but there's 34 minutes of a lot of work. And just, again, to see him put out that kind of effort in another losing game where, you just feel like he is a finite resource now. And the amount of that resource that they're going to have to use up while Davis is out to try to maintain, not even gain ground, just maintain their level, is going to be really frustrating and really worrisome, I think, for Lakers fans. Anyway, so Adam Silver says that the league is not going to be pausing. They're going to keep trying to play the games. They've done a bunch of things this week, loosening up roster rules, demanding teams sign guys, creating roster spots and all that kind of stuff if players go into their COVID protocols. But that doesn't mean that the games on Saturday might end up postponed. Brooklyn has already had some games postponed, and don't know quite yet who they're going to have available going in. This stuff changes very quickly. The larger question, I think, Andy, really is, should the NBA be considering a pause? Well, you answer first. What do you think?
For the time being, I don't think so. Obviously things can get worse. And I thought it was interesting that Adam Silver pointed out that the overwhelming majority of players who have tested positive have been testing positive specifically for Omicron, that variant, as opposed to, say, Delta, or I don't know what the original flavor of COVID was, but back in the day, the variants that were considered,
it looked like an original, like an iPod. It's not even like
right.
It's got just like the thing in the middle that you
like the original
through.
Cheerios, before you get the honey nut or like the apple cinnamon or the chocolate or whatever, and that's important to point out, just because obviously the Omicron variant is serious and its transmissibility is extremely high, but it's more serious in terms of an overarching, what the hell do we do about this? How do we finally get all these variants under control, as opposed to at least what we know so far.
Well, yes,
it is in terms of the immediate danger of contracting it. If you are vaccinated, in particular, if you are vaccinated and boosted,
but particularly just even young guys vaccinated, which almost all of these guys are, and that to me is, and it's sports are the gateway in a lot of ways for this larger COVID conversation. No question. Like there are a lot of people who believe like COVID really began when Rudy Gobert tested positive and the NBA shut down.
Yeah.
It's right in line with Tom Hanks, and like those two things kind of like made it real for everyone, regardless of where you are in your hobbies. And but it's important to understand, I think, to me, that the world is very different. That was a world where we knew even less than we know now, despite all the unknowns. But it was a world without vaccines. It was a world without more treatments and all these other things. And that these players are vaccinated. Many of them are boosted, not all of them, but many are boosted, and that most of them are not.
They estimated about 65% are boosted.
Yeah. Most of the players are not getting seriously ill. I mean, Joel Embiid, Jakob Poeltl, there are examples. It shows that the vaccines and those things are working. They are working as intended. It just shows too, sports aren't built for this sort of thing. And the NBA, like the NFL, is trying to figure out, how do we play games in a world where COVID is endemic going forward? Because it can't stop every time this is going to happen if COVID is going to be something that returns like the seasonal flu and there's a new variant and all that stuff. But at the same time, you got to make sure you are protecting players, protecting athletes, maybe even from themselves to the best that you can. I just don't know what you accomplish by stopping, because the serious risk to players seems to be low.
In terms of what we know.
In terms of what we know. Right. And that's all,
it's all you can go
with. And it doesn't appear that a week and a half pause, 2-week pause or whatever would necessarily solve the problem.
I don't think it would do jack, to be honest.
Even if guys stayed sort of distanced from people and all that kind of stuff, the minute everybody gets back together, it's like, it seems like it would just start spreading again.
Yeah. I mean, for all the reasons that, are suspected for these spikes that we're going through right now, weather getting colder, holiday seasons, kids out of school, families getting together, stuff like that. Like, I think you would have to, if you really wanted to try to do this effectively, again, this is me just trying to do guesswork based off what I know, or what I seem to understand. I think you'd have to pause till at least like mid-January, maybe longer.
Maybe later. To let it completely slide. I don't know.
But the idea of a week doesn't seem like it would do anything. That's just rearranging cosmetic. The deck chairs.
It's completely cosmetic. And sports are doing what we're all doing, which is trying to figure out what is normal? What does normal look like now? What does safe look like now? What is the risk, rate that we are willing to accept, whether that's to go to the movie theater to see Spider-Man, or to go watch an NBA game, or to stage NBA games, or to play in NBA games if you happen to be that lucky. And it's kind of a fascinating thing to deal with, but I don't think the players want to stop either. They don't
No.
want to start. They don't want to get back into the things that they were doing before. If I were an athlete, I'd certainly want to learn as much as possible what it means. They had part of the reasons testing has spiked, or the cases spikes, because they started testing a lot more. If I think it was the NFL said they were going to stop testing asymptomatic people who are vaccinated, and if that happens, you are going to have people playing with COVID. I would want to know as an athlete what that risk might be. If I'm asymptomatic, but I have COVID and I go through a week of football practices, could that do something to me? I don't know. I'd want to know.
I don't honestly. I mean, the scariest thing, I guess, for an athlete would be, I don't think anybody knows. Like, the answer might be
Sure.
whoever you go to, the answer may just be, we're not
right.
sure.
And obviously, both of us are trying to be very careful about how we even talk about these things, because there are so many things that we don't know. But
And
I just,
for people who haven't been with us, going back to our older shows or ESPN, like from the beginning of the pandemic, Brian and I are both people who've taken this very seriously.
we take it very seriously. I
We're in
think
favor of the original shutdowns, all that stuff. We've taken this stuff very seriously. We've encouraged people to follow the science, do the vaccinations, do the things you're supposed to do.
You're erring on the side of caution,
Yes,
even
exactly.
while also not being panic porn.
Sure, but I just want to
type
provide
either.
that
Sure.
context.
I appreciate that. I don't. This is a monumentally complicated problem, but I think the difference between this year and last year, in terms, a year and a half ago, in terms of the reaction that some people have, is I do think it is a mistake, and we can quit here. I just think it's a big mistake to treat this moment as exactly the same as the day Rudy Gobert tested, positive, and they had to shut down the league. It is not the same world. It's not the same virus. It's not that we don't have the same. And while things are bad, sort of in the globally, it is bad, and spread is bad, and it could get really ugly over the next few weeks. That isn't the same as saying that the league should shut down in response, because it's about the health and of these players and the risk to these players and the support staff and all that other kind of stuff. And it's just not the same world. And so the NBA is working under different conditions. So if you could say, it is a mistake to me to say, well, they shut down before when there was a lot of spread, they should shut down now. Context matters.
Yeah. And don't have to discuss all of it now, but there's also a massive trickle down effect in terms of the employment and economics of people, not players on the team, not coaches, not the league itself. There are a lot of, there's a lot of ancillary tentacle stuff like that. A lot of people get affected from this, which again, doesn't mean you should never shut down. We were both in favor of the first time things shut down, but as you pointed out, Brian, it's different now. So you have to, at least if nothing else, evaluate the question differently.
All right. So over the next few days, probably a little bit more will be coming out about what's happening on Saturday and what won't be. But Thursday's game against San Antonio suddenly becoming a really significant one for the Lakers. They are going to practice on Wednesday. I believe it's their 9th. Harrison Fagan at Silver Screen Roll, who has been counting them. Maybe we'll have some news coming out of that. Hopefully some good news about player availability and whatnot. Thanks for making the Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day. And we will see everybody Thursday. Thanks.